What if I told you the universe was never testing you? That all this time you weren't being punished nor forgotten, but simply invited into a deeper alignment? You've meditated, you've visualized, you've affirmed in the silence of your room until your voice became a whisper, and still the life you imagined remains just out of reach, as if behind glass. Maybe you feel like you've done everything they said, followed every technique, read every book, watched every video, and yet something remains stuck, something you can't quite name but feel every morning as that quiet tension in your chest, that ache of not yet, that invisible weight that keeps you halfway between belief and surrender. You're not broken, you're not blocked, you're simply in a loop, a sacred loop, where the external hasn't changed because the internal hasn't truly shifted, not the ideas, but the state, that invisible ground from which you're imagining, feeling, acting. As Neville once said, no one can change until he changes his imaginal acts. But let's go deeper. It's not just about what you imagine, it's where you imagine from. The state of being that holds your desires like seeds waiting for permission to root. You may think you're creating a new life, but if your emotional state is still echoing the past, still tied to the frequency of disappointment, lack, and needing to be saved, then you're not creating, you're rehearsing. The same script, the same vibration, the same self-image, dressed in new spiritual language. Dr. Joe Dispenza puts it clearly. You can't create a new future from the same emotional state as your past. And your body, your sacred, sensitive, listening body, is always broadcasting the truth of what you feel, not what you say. This is the paradox of the spiritual path. The more effort you make to force it, the more you confirm that it's not yet done. Every attempt to make it happen carries the silent message that it hasn't. Every ritual performed out of fear of missing the window is still aligned with doubt. Every desperate affirmation is a prayer from lack. You don't need to try harder. You need to shift entirely, from force to faith, from seeking to remembering. That's why this video isn't here to teach you something new. It's here to reveal what has always been quietly canceling your progress. Not your intention, but your identification. Not your dream, but the state you've been dreaming from. You've become a student of manifestation, when you were born to be its embodiment, and you can't cross the river by rearranging the water. You must change banks entirely. So today, we stop rearranging. We stop waiting. We stop chasing techniques like golden keys to a locked door. The door was never locked. You were simply standing on the wrong side, the side of becoming instead of being. In the next moments, I'll show you the 5 most subtle, yet powerful mistakes that keep most people stuck in spiritual circles, and I'll help you dissolve each one, not through force, but through return. Return to the state of fulfillment. Return to the self who already has. Return to the identity that doesn't ask, when will it happen, but instead breathes, it is done. Come with an open heart. Come with your invisible wounds. Come as you are. Because the shift doesn't happen by doing more. It happens by becoming different, and you are already on the threshold of that becoming, manifesting from lack instead of identity. There's a hidden tension that most people never question, the vibration of wanting. It seems innocent, even empowering. You want love, you want abundance, you want peace. But here's the quiet truth. Wanting is not having. Wanting, when repeated as an emotional state, becomes the subtle declaration that you don't yet have. And so, you remain aligned with the absence of the thing you desire, rather than its presence. Neville didn't say, feel like it might happen. He said, you do not desire what you already are. The real work then is not to want more. It's to become the one who no longer needs to want. The one who remembers the self where that desire is already fulfilled. Because when you are the thing you are chasing, the chase dissolves. You stop being the beggar at the gates of your own mansion. The mind loves to chase. The brain, as psychology tells us through the goal gradient effect, rewards progress, not completion. So unconsciously you stay in motion, scripting, visualizing, adjusting your methods, because it gives you the illusion of advancement. But stillness is power. Being is power. Embodiment ends the chase. And that, ironically, is when it arrives. So feel into this. What if your desire isn't something to reach for, but something to remember? What if your next step is not to ask the universe, but to recall your identity as the one who already has? You're not chasing money. You're remembering yourself as the one who holds it with calm certainty. You're not attracting love. You're reconnecting with the version of you who is already cherished, already whole. Let this become your new language. Not I want, but I remember. Not I hope it happens, but this is who I am now. Speak to yourself from that version. Dress like them. Breathe like them. Walk into rooms with their energy wrapped around your body like a sacred garment. Because you no longer need to impress the world. You only need to stop hiding from your truth. It's like digging for treasure outside your house when the map was always hidden under your own floorboards. The treasure doesn't respond to effort. It reveals itself to recognition. When you stop begging at your own door, the door opens. Not because you knocked harder, but because you realized it was never locked to begin with. So breathe into this shift. You're not trying to become. You're not in pursuit. You're in remembrance. You are the one. You are the fulfillment. You are the answer to your own prayer. And when that becomes your identity, your reality, inevitably, obediently, transforms. Using techniques to prove, not to create. There's a subtle desperation hidden in many spiritual routines, a quiet question beneath the affirmations, a lingering doubt behind every visualization. It sounds like this: is this working? And in that question, innocent as it may seem, lies the very frequency that repels what you desire. Because to test the technique is to doubt the outcome. To ask if it's working is to imply that it's not yet real. Neville spoke to this with precision. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that assumption. Not visit it, not peek at it, not ask the universe for a sign. Assume, because assumption is not a hope, it's a knowing. And knowing leaves no room for experimentation. Knowing does not seek evidence, it creates it. You may believe you're doing the work, but beneath the surface, there may still be that quiet urge to check, to monitor, to measure. That's not creation, that's performance. And the universe doesn't respond to performance, and it reflects conviction. Affirmations aren't spells, visualizations aren't tricks, they're mirrors. And if what you're projecting is coated in, let's see if this works, then the mirror can only echo back your uncertainty. Behavioral science speaks to this too. Expectancy theory shows that actions driven by uncertainty often reinforce the very state of uncertainty. When you plant a seed and dig it up every day to see if it's growing, you don't nurture the seed, you interrupt its becoming. In the same way, when you use manifestation techniques to test instead of to embody, you delay what's already on its way. So what if your visualizations became sacred? Not experiments, not rituals of control, but devotion, a private ceremony of identity. You're not testing the universe, you're declaring who you are in silence. You're worshipping the version of yourself who already exists in the field, not as a fantasy, but as a reality waiting for your steadiness. Can you feel the difference? One frequency says, I hope this works. The other says, this is already mine. One frequency doubts and checks and doubts again. The other breathes, relaxes, and continues to live as if it is already done. This is not about intensity, it's about intimacy. The relationship between you and your vision must be one of loyalty, not manipulation. Trust isn't loud, it doesn't beg for signs. It doesn't repeat itself out of fear. It whispers once, and then it walks. Because it knows the world is already rearranging itself to mirror back what has been claimed. Let this be your shift. Stop using your tools to convince yourself. Start using them as expressions of remembrance. You're not here to prove the law. You are the law in motion. You're not waiting for evidence, you are the evidence. And when that becomes your truth, reality follows. Quietly, obediently, inevitably. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from being split in two. One part of you believes, speaks the affirmations, listens to the meditations, visualizes the future, but the other part, silent, somatic, hidden, still trembles in the presence of fear, doubt, or unworthiness. And that split creates a vibrational contradiction, a war of frequencies, a message that says yes with the mind but no with the body. Neville said it without compromise. Feeling is the secret. Not thinking, not repeating, feeling. Because your thoughts are only suggestions. It's the emotional charge behind them that sends the signal. The universe responds to your dominant vibration, not your verbal declarations. You can say I am abundant 1,000 times, But if your chest is tight with anxiety, you're not creating abundance, you're confirming its absence. This is where science and spirit meet. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains that when the brain and heart are incoherent, the energy field becomes unstable. It's like trying to tune into a station while holding a cracked antenna. The message becomes static. The signal can't land, not because the desire is wrong, but because the vessel is unclear. The body is your instrument of manifestation, and emotion is its music. If the feeling doesn't match the vision, the song becomes dissonant. And in that dissonance, your power leaks. This isn't a failure, it's a signal, a sacred alarm that you've been bypassing the emotional layer in favor of intellectual mastery. But manifestation isn't about knowing more, it's about becoming more emotionally aligned. So return to simplicity, return to breath, not to think, but to feel. Inhale gently for 5 seconds, hold the space, exhale for 5 seconds, and as you breathe, summon one emotion. Gratitude for the already fulfilled, not excitement for the possible, but gratitude, deep, calm, and certain, for what already belongs to you in the invisible. Let it rise like warmth through your chest. Let it coat every thought with its presence. Let it replace tension with trust. Because when your thoughts and emotions walk hand in hand, you become magnetic, aligned, whole. No more silent contradiction. No more pretending to believe while secretly bracing for disappointment. You become a single note, pure, resonant, received. So the next time you catch yourself thinking one thing and feeling another, don't force alignment. Invite it. Breathe into it. Bring your body back to the conversation, because you are not just a mind trying to convince itself. You are a field of energy ready to harmonize. And when your thoughts are no longer at war with your feelings, your manifestation doesn't need to be chased. It arrives, quietly, naturally, as a reflection of your inner coherence. Subscribe to stay aligned with your fulfilled self. There comes a moment when the very tools meant to liberate you begin to confine you. You start with pure intention, a morning routine, a vision board, a journal full of affirmations. But over time, the method becomes a ritual of anxiety. You don't visualize to remember who you are. You visualize to stop the fear that you're falling behind. You don't script to embody the future. You script because you're scared of losing your alignment. And in that shift, something sacred is forgotten. Neville was clear. States are all that matter. Not routines, not repetition. State. Because when the state is real, the method becomes irrelevant. You don't need to repeat a ritual when you've become the thing you were chasing. The technique serves as a bridge, but once you cross it, you don't camp there. You walk, you live, you become. The psychological danger here is subtle. When methods replace state, they become superstitions, a kind of spiritual dependency. You begin to believe that missing one day of scripting will delay your manifestation, that if you don't meditate the exact way, at the exact time, the universe won't hear you. But the universe isn't listening to your habits. It's responding to your identity. There's a power in letting go, not out of neglect but out of arrival. What happens when you stop needing the method? Who do you become when you trust that your new state doesn't require constant reinforcement? This isn't spiritual laziness. It's vibrational mastery. It's what happens when you stop checking the recipe because you've become the dish. Try living 1 week without any formal technique, not to rebel, not to test, but to trust. Trust that the state of being you've been rehearsing is now alive, that it walks with you, speaks through you, decides with you, that your every action, your tone, your posture, your pace is already the technique. Because when the state is embodied, life becomes the ritual. It's the difference between memorizing a map and actually walking the territory. You can know every step intellectually, but unless you leave your house and feel the dirt under your feet, you haven't traveled. The real transformation happens not in the repetition of steps, but in the quiet certainty of being where you always intended to go. So breathe into this. Your methods were sacred. They brought you here. But now it's time to step into the real power, the state beyond the method, the naturalness of your new self, the embodiment that doesn't need reminders because it lives in the bones. Let your life become the evidence. Let your presence be the practice. Let your state speak louder than your rituals ever could. Because when you are the thing, you no longer need to perform it. You simply live it, and the world responds. Always. Misreading delay as denial. There's a particular ache that surfaces when time passes and nothing seems to change. You held the vision. You felt the wish fulfilled. You walked with the energy of your future self. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And still, silence. Still, no sign. Still, the question creeping back in, what if it's not working? This is where many surrender their power. Not through failure, but through interpretation. You don't collapse because things didn't manifest. You collapse because you decided that the delay was proof of denial. You believed the pause was a punishment, that the silence meant rejection. But that belief is the only thing that disrupts the unfolding. Neville revealed a truth that bypasses the emotional noise. An assumption, though false if persisted in, will harden into fact. It's not about being right immediately. It's about being faithful unconditionally. The time between your assumption and its materialization is not a test. It's a preparation, a weaving of unseen events, a divine orchestration that responds not to impatience, but to inner permanence. Neuroscience confirms what the mystics knew. To create new external realities, you must rewire the internal ones, and that requires repetition, not as effort, but as identity rehearsal. Every time you assume the new version of yourself, you're laying down a new neural pathway. And every time you doubt, you're reinforcing the old one. This isn't metaphysical punishment. It's energetic law. The bridge of incidents, that invisible sequence that carries you from now to the manifestation, is always forming. Not when you feel good. Not when you say the right affirmation. But the moment you persist in the new state. The moment you decide that nothing in the external world can pull you back into waiting. Because you're no longer a seeker. You are the one it's all moving toward. So what if the silence isn't absence, but gestation? What if the universe is not denying your desire, but assembling the perfect unfolding behind the curtain of time? Imagine the image of a Polaroid photograph. It doesn't appear the moment it's taken. It develops slowly, in the dark, in stillness. If you shake it too hard, rush it, panic, you blur the very image you're trying to bring into clarity. This is the work now, not to force results, but to hold your state with gentleness and certainty. Not to rush divine timing, but to realize that delay is not the opposite of manifestation. It is part of it. It is the patience of the soul, aligning the pieces you can't yet see. It is grace disguised as pause. You didn't fail, you didn't fall behind, you're not being ignored. You are being reshaped, recentered, remembered by the very state you've chosen to occupy. And the longer you stay faithful, not to the outcome, but to the identity, the more life will rise to match you. Not because you demanded, but because you trusted, because you remembered what most forget, that the fulfillment was never in the speed, it was always in the state. And that is a state you can enter now, effortlessly, silently, completely. It's easy to mistake movement for evolution, to believe that because you're constantly doing, reading, learning, consuming, you must be changing. But transformation isn't loud. It's not measured in how many courses you take, how many meditations you complete, or how many hours you spend watching spiritual content. True change is quiet, invisible at first, and often missed by the very mind addicted to progress. This is the seduction of spiritual busyness. You feel restless, uncertain, or disconnected, and so you reach for another video, another journal, another affirmation app. Not because you're evolving, but because you're trying to escape the discomfort of stillness, the discomfort of not knowing, of not controlling. But the stillness is where the shift begins, not the noise, not the effort. The silence between actions is where the real rewiring happens. Neville didn't ask us to accumulate knowledge. He asked us to assume, because knowledge without assumption is weightless. It fills the mind, but leaves the state unchanged. You can know every technique, memorize every principle, quote every passage, but if you haven't assumed the identity of the one who already has, you're still standing outside the gates of your own becoming. Psychologists call it the action bias, the tendency to do something, anything, to relieve the discomfort of uncertainty. But healing requires discomfort. Manifestation requires stillness. The new identity doesn't always emerge through action. Sometimes it emerges when you stop chasing it and allow it to breathe through you. So instead of adding more today, ask yourself, what can I embody now? What insight have I already received but haven't fully lived? Maybe it's a sentence you read last week, a realization that struck you in the middle of a walk, a truth that left an imprint on your soul. Take that single thread and wear it, not as a concept, but as clothing. Let it shape how you speak, how you breathe, how you stand when you enter a room. Transformation isn't about how much you know, it's about how differently you live from what you now remember, and that doesn't always need explanation. In fact, the more powerful the shift, the less it demands words. There's a difference between watching others swim and stepping into the water yourself. The temperature can't be known until you're submerged, and for that, you must stop observing and start experiencing. You can run miles on a treadmill and never leave the room. So much movement. No real distance, but take one quiet step in the right direction, from within, and you've already crossed dimensions. The universe does not count your efforts. It reflects your embodiment. It doesn't respond to how much you do. It responds to who you are while doing it. So pause, exhale, and in that space, become, without needing more, without chasing another answer. Let your next act be born not from panic, but from presence. Because when motion ends and transformation begins, you won't need to prove that you've changed. The world will know. It will respond, without hesitation, without delay. There's a deep tension that arises when you try to embody a new reality, while still secretly identifying with the old. One part of you says, I believe. The other whispers, but what if it doesn't work? You visualize your future with clarity, yet react to your present with fear. You affirm abundance, but still check your bank account with anxiety. This internal split doesn't make you broken, it makes you divided, and a divided self can't manifest with power. Neville said, you must become single-minded, not wishful, not hopeful, single-minded, because creation doesn't respond to a conflicted frequency. It responds to congruence. It listens not just to your words but to the totality of your vibration, what you expect, what you prepare for, and what you emotionally assume to be true. This isn't about eliminating doubt with force. It's about noticing where two identities are trying to live in the same body, the one who trusts and the one who clings to past disappointments, the one who creates and the one who compensates for past wounds. These fragments are not enemies. They are echoes, echoes of who you used to be, trying to survive inside who you are becoming. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, the mental and emotional strain of holding conflicting beliefs. It manifests as sabotage, procrastination, and emotional confusion. But at its core, it's a call for coherence, a call to choose, not with effort, but with being. So ask yourself gently, who am I rehearsing today? The version of me who remembers my power, or the one who's still waiting for proof before relaxing into it? Because the truth is, you are always rehearsing something, whether it's your past, your fears, your unworthiness, or your new self, your chosen identity, your assumed truth. And you don't need hours. You only need 5 minutes of alignment to begin softening the old identity's grip. Close your eyes. Feel the scene from the end. The version of you who is no longer waiting, no longer fragmented, the one who walks into rooms knowing, not explaining, not defending, just being. Let that version breathe through you, speak through you, make decisions through you. Two captains cannot steer one ship, and if one believes in expansion while the other braces for collapse, the vessel will never find its direction. So let the old captain rest, not in judgment, but in gratitude, because they brought you this far. But they are no longer fit to guide what comes next. This chapter is not about removing your past, it's about integrating it, and then choosing who leads. Your manifestations don't require perfection, they require purity of signal. And that purity comes when you stop dancing between identities and fully occupy the one that matches the life you've been calling in. When that happens, you won't need to convince anyone that you've shifted. The world will know. The evidence will come, not as proof, but as reflection. Because when your inner allegiance is clear, the outer response is inevitable. And suddenly the delay ends, not because you forced the outcome, but because you finally stopped living from two selves at once. There's a moment, maybe after a meditation, a breakthrough, or a powerful affirmation, when you feel it, a sudden surge of lightness, joy, even euphoria. And it's beautiful. It feels like you're finally aligned, finally in the right frequency. But then the next morning comes. The doubts creep back in. Reality still looks the same, and you wonder, was that real? Did I lose it? This is the trap of emotional spikes. The belief that a moment of high vibration equals proof that the manifestation is near. That feeling temporarily elevated is the same as being vibrationally anchored, but Neville never taught that manifestation responds to moments of emotional fireworks. He taught that it responds to naturalness, the sustained ease of already being the thing you desire. So what happens when we chase the highs? When we think we must feel ecstatic every day to manifest, we create dependency. We begin to fear neutral states. We mistake peace for disconnection. We start to believe that if we're not constantly high, we're doing something wrong. But real alignment doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like stillness, like quiet knowing. Like walking into your kitchen and making tea in a house you already own. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains this through the lens of neuroscience. Dopamine highs can deceive the brain. They make you feel like you're making progress, when in reality, you're only stimulating a temporary chemical rush. The danger is that it doesn't last, and when the rush fades, doubt fills the silence. True manifestation isn't about how high you can fly. It's about how calmly you can remain in the state of already having. It's not an emotional spike. It's an emotional home, a resting place, a baseline of identity that doesn't depend on the day or the mood or the moon. It's steady. It's integrated. It doesn't scream. It whispers, I am. So start tracking not how intensely you feel something, but how consistently you rest in it. Because fulfillment doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes like sunlight, quiet, stable, nourishing. Fireworks burn out. The sun sustains life. Let your emotional barometer shift from chasing ecstasy to embodying peace. Let your goal become not to feel more intensely, but to feel more naturally. When your abundance feels as normal as your morning coffee, it's no longer trying to arrive, it already has. And in that stillness, something opens. The space where the miraculous enters, not through spectacle, but through quiet alignment. That's the real sign, that's the proof. Not the surge, but the softness. Not the high, but the homecoming. And once you reach that place, you won't need to ask, is it working? You'll just live, as the one for whom it already has. Many unknowingly turn manifestation into a silent audition, trying to prove they're good enough to receive. You meditate, affirm, stay positive, hoping it makes you more deserving. But behind the discipline is a hidden belief. Until I earn it, I can't have it. This isn't spiritual devotion. It's subtle self-rejection. Neville said, creation is finished. What you seek already exists. It's not withheld because you haven't been good enough. It's waiting for you to assume the state, not to beg for it. Psychology reveals that guilt-based striving only deepens unworthiness. The more you try to deserve, the more you affirm lack. This is why nothing changes. You're not a student being graded. You're a soul remembering what was always yours. A prince doesn't plead to enter his own castle. He walks in, not with arrogance, but with recognition. So stop rehearsing worthiness. Stop treating your spiritual path as a performance. Your desires are not rewards for discipline. They're reflections of identity. Shift from trying to earn the life you want to living as the one who already has it. Not later, not when you're better. Now, because you are it, and you always were. Just before true change, resistance appears. Old thoughts return. Doubt sharpens. Emotion stirs. You may think you're falling backward, but you're actually shifting forward. Neville said, you die daily. Resistance isn't failure. It's the old self unraveling. When you assume a new identity, the nervous system reacts. Not because you're wrong, but because you're unfamiliar. Your brain, built to predict, resists what it cannot recognize. So as you embody abundance, peace, or worth, expect to tremble. That's the past trying to stay alive. Neuroscience confirms this. Transformation feels uncomfortable because new neural paths are being carved. It's not a sign to stop. It's a sign something real is happening. So breathe through it, reframe it. The discomfort is sacred. It means your vibration is outgrowing the limits you once called home. You're not breaking down, you're breaking through. It was never the universe. It was always the state you lived from. You weren't blocked. You were being realigned. Your state, not your effort, was always the cause. Nothing was wasted. Every delay revealed where you still waited instead of assumed. The moment you embody the fulfilled self, reality no longer resists. It reflects, instantly, quietly, completely.